Hello everyone and welcome along to another instalment of the TurfCast Podcast pre-game show. This time we are talking to Harry from the Wolves 77 podcast ahead of our clash at the time of recording tomorrow, but at the time of you're watching it, it will be this evening against Wolves, 5 o'clock on Monday evening. How are you doing, Harry?
Really good, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on, mate. Thanks for coming on. So obviously, those of you that are new to the show, you'll know that, that aren't new to the show, you'll know that we get sort of like a fan of the opposition on every single week to sort of like have a chat about the opposition, because when me and Simon are on the podcast, we don't know much about Wolves, let's be fair. Especially compared to Harry, he'll know quite a lot about Wolves. So it's the perfect person to pick the brain about Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. So, Harry, let's get straight into it then. Talk to me about your season so far, because I was looking at the league table and I were expecting Wolves to be up in 8th, 9th. 11th. I wish we were in 11th. It's not exactly bad, but because Wolves have done so well over the last couple of seasons, I kind of expected them to be higher. So how do you think your season's gone so far?
Yeah, it's been a really strange one, mate, because obviously we were in the Europa League last season. Everyone had a bit of a weird season last year with the pandemic, but we started in like the July, ended in like the July because of the pandemic, and then quick turnaround. We lost Doherty, we lost Diogo Jota, got Semedo and Fabio Silva in, and it was a bit of a worry to start off because we were playing 5 at the back as we always do. We always know what we're going to do. We know the plan. Although we some decent results, scraping 1-0 here and there, we lost 4-0 to West Ham, like absolutely smashed, and Wolves fans were really vocal about how bored they were with the football, and we wanted to change it, which we did. We've ended up going with a 4 at the back, and I suppose it's going okay, mate. Obviously, the ideal situation would be improve on our 2 last 7th place finishes over the last 2 years. But you look at someone like Sheffield United, who suffered from second season syndrome. We're now in our 3rd season in the Premier League, so I don't think we could moan too much. But it's been a very split opinion from the Wolves fans in terms of being bored of what we're seeing, but maybe we're just getting a bit too spoiled because we've had 2 7ths in a row.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because everyone has this opinion of Burnley that it's negative, boring, long ball tactics, and not many Burnley fans do tend to moan about that. We're just a case of if it's working, we're happy with that. We're happy, we finished 10th last season, 7th a couple of seasons before that, obviously the year before you came up, and then you stole our 7th place in the league table. But yeah, when I think of Wolves, I think of not necessarily fast, free-flowing attacking football, but decent football. You've got a lot of very good technical players. So what is it exactly that you're bored of?
Well, Nunes' philosophy is always, for example, if we're 2-0 up, he'll bring on like a defensive player and try and protect it. We'll never go on and score 3 and 4. I think the last time we scored 4 in the league was in the Championship against Leeds. So we do play good stuff when we want it, but we always set up with a solid foundation. And it just seems like this season, because of the players we've lost and the players we've come in, it's taking players a while to know the system. But so it's took them a while to be fluid going forward. The first 2 seasons, say that, in the second season last year, towards the end of the season after lockdown, it started to get quite boring and predictable. But yeah, it's knowing the system, and when they do, mate, we can be fluid. You can see some of the highlight reels of Traore flying down the wing, whipping it into Raul Jimenez, some of the passing. But yeah, it's because first and foremost, Nuno is quite a defensive manager, but it gets you the results, so we can't complain.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a similar thing for us, isn't it? Sean Dyche is, to be fair, quite a defensive manager, but we a club like Burnley shouldn't really be finishing 7th and 10th in the Premier League, according to some people. Again, we're a set of fans that will say it's a case of if you finish 7th, you obviously deserve it. You're there for a reason. But let's talk about, you've just mentioned it. You said you lost Doherty, you lost the lad that went to Liverpool, his name Jota. Yeah. So are Wolves different this season then? Can we expect anything different from Wolves? Because like I said, you kind of think how Wolves are gonna play, but this season, for example, they could be different. So what's different this season?
Yeah, well, we lost Jota, but we've got Pedro Neto and Podence they're amazing players who have fitted in really well. They've been our best players this season. Obviously, Semedo's come in for Doherty, and he has struggled at times. He's had some bad performances. He gave away a penalty last minute against Villa, and it seems like teams are actually targeting him because although he come from Barcelona, he's not very good at defending. He's so used to flying forward and attacking all game. I think he's forgot that part of his game. But the other obvious one, mate, is Raul Jimenez being now injured. We've got young Fabio Silva in the team who He's only 18, so it's a lot of pressure on him, and he's got a big price tag, and he hasn't scored yet in the league, but he hit the post against Villa. So what you should expect from us is, I think we will play 4 at the back against you. Although we played 5 at the back against Chelsea, I think Nuno started to now, where he's never done this. He usually has one formation, 5 at the back, and bang, just plays that no matter what. But he started now to play 4 at the back, and I believe, no disrespect to Burnley, but teams down the bottom who we will probably need to attack, he will play 4 at the back and go for it like a 4-2-3-1 with Fabio Silva leading the line on his own.
Yeah, so talk to me about Jimenez then. We'll touch on the injury in a bit and we'll go more into that in a second. But a lot of pundits, I always hear the same line, well, Wolves are a different animal without star player Raul Jimenez. Do you think that's a bit harsh, or do you think you're a bit more than, not necessarily a one-man squad, but do you think you're more than just focus all your play around Jimenez?
He's a massive part of our team. Like, everything was through him, to be honest. And when he did get injured, it was a case of, well, who's going to score? Because Jota was the man next to him who would score loads of goals too, and he left. But Pedro Neto and Podence are stepping up. So we do miss him, mate. He's a huge, huge miss for us, because Traore's game was getting down the wing, whipping it into him, and he'd score. After the game, when he was injured, the few games after, Traore was doing that, and there was nobody in the middle to do it. Against Liverpool, we had Podence through the middle with 3 up top. And he's about 5'4", so it's never going to work. So he's a massive miss, mate, because he scores pretty much all our goals and he gets a lot of assists too. So he's going to be a huge miss, and we'll need to get someone in January to help Fabio Silva out to, I guess, recover some of his goals we're going to miss.
Yeah, what talk to me about the injury as well then, because I remember it was a shocker, weren't it? But people, for obvious reasons, always compare it with the Peter Cech one, and obviously Peter Cech would have never played again if he didn't wear the helmet, or if he probably was an outfield player. I don't think he'd have ever played again. And there was a lot of talk about maybe Jimenez never playing again. Obviously, it's all gone a bit quiet in terms of the national press. I've not seen too much other than he went to the training ground the other week. So what is it later? So presumably, I've not heard anything about him having to retire. So presumably he's going to be all right on that aspect. Sorry, go on.
He actually released a video on Twitter about an hour ago, Sunday at time recording, and he put a thank you message out. He sat with his wife and his kid. He's shaved all his head off, and you can see the big scar down the side of his head where it happened. But he will play again. All the messages are that he will play again. When it happened, mate, the impact, everyone was going on about Ryan Mason, who had to retire for Hull, obviously the Petr Cech injury.
Yeah, that's a good one as well,
Yeah, Ryan Mason. And we had a player called Don Goodman in the 90s who had a head injury, but he carried on. He had 6 months out. But he was awake straight away as soon as he got to the hospital. But they haven't released any details, but he was up and on social media a few days after the incident, and his missus was. And I think he will be okay. And he strikes me as a character who will want to come back and play as he can. So we will see him. He was speaking on that video he released today saying, thank you, I'll be back soon. But it was a nasty one. You saw the impact. He's got a big scar on his head. And I think he's just lucky that he hasn't had actual brain damage from it, because obviously that can happen. I think he just cracked his skull. He's just got to wait for that to recover. But it's just whether he can recover from it psychologically. Like next time he goes up for a header when he's on the pitch and things like that. I think that's why Ryan Mason retired, because he couldn't get over that barrier, the mental barrier. Yeah,
good point. Fingers crossed, obviously, for you. And fingers crossed for him as well. Nobody wants to see a player forced into early retirement. It's obviously a massive miss for you. I just want to touch on the games last season. The one at the Turf, Jimenez, perfect bridge into that. He scored an absolute unbelievable goal. There was so much technical ability in that goal. You will honestly never see a Burnley player score a goal like that. Not since the likes of Stephen Defoe and Robbie Blake. None of this current squad has scored a goal like that. But and then we obviously got the late penalty as well, didn't it? And then I think we said it on your podcast this week, didn't I? That it don't get any more top bins than that crisp penalty. But talk to me about that. Yeah, talk to me about that game, because it must have been a frustrating one for you boys.
Yeah, well, but the game at Molineux as well was 1-1, and we scored a last-minute penalty too, if you remember.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you deserved the win that day. I remember it. We just played the Europa League game, and one of your lads, I can't remember which one, scored a great volley. But yeah, the one at your place, it was gutting because we were still chasing even the top 4 at that point. Never mind just the Europa League. Like, we still had a chance at top 4, and it broke our hearts. That result, a lot of Wolves fans point to that result and say that's the one that knocked the stuffing out the players. So fair play to Burnley. Like from the outside looking in, from a Wolves point of view, we always struggle against you. You're a well-organised team. We struggle to break you down, and you're effective at what you do. And I mean, I've seen a few Wolves fans on Twitter today discussing it, saying like, honestly, looking at the fixtures pre-Chelsea game, some Wolves fans were more worried about getting some kind of result against Burnley away than actually against Chelsea at home, as mad as it sounds, because Wolves do really well against the so-called top 4 teams, bigger teams. Yeah. And we always struggle against teams that we're meant to beat on paper, if that makes sense.
It's interesting that you say that, because I were going to go into that, sort of like what you view Burnley as and your perspective on Burnley, and we'll go into it again, actually, to be fair. But for some reason, since you've come back up, I don't think you've beaten us yet, have you? Because it was 1-1 at Molineux the season before. It's not last season, the season before.
We beat you 1-0 the first year, I think. I think we beat you 1-0 first season we come up. Yeah, a Raul Jimenez goal. Yeah, I think we did.
My memory is shocking. I would 100% back you on that. But we'll check it out. But at the Turf, especially, which is where we're going to go. Where we're playing. Sorry. Obviously, last season it was 1-1. We've just mentioned it. The season before that, it was one of the games that like Dwight McNeil came onto the scene and burst onto the scene, and everyone was like, hold on, this guy's actually really, really good. It were a few games before you against West Ham where everyone was like, hold on, this kid can play. Then against you, he scored a cracking goal, edge at 18 yards. A bit of a snapshot, to be fair, but perfect placement. But why do you think you tend to struggle at Turf Moor and against Burnley in truth?
Well, Wolves famously struggle to break teams down. And as I mentioned a minute ago, you're a very solid team. Although most of the time, from my memory, you play 4-4-2 a lot. You're very structured in what you do. And it's hard to break you down. It's as simple as that. And Wolves are best. They're most lethal when we can hit teams on the counter-attack. We did it against Chelsea when we beat them 2-1 the other day. And that's why, mate, we just really struggle to break teams down. Now, with this new 4 at the back, as I mentioned earlier, we're hoping that we can take it 2 teams and go on the front foot and try and get an early goal, so you have to come out at us. But it's easier said than done. Last season, I believe it was last season, Huddersfield did a double over us when they got relegated. I think we were the only team they beat twice. There's an example of us. We have a lot of the ball against teams that sit back and are well organised. We can't do nothing with it, and then we'll concede one and lose like 1-0 or something like that. So that's why we struggle against Burnley a lot.
It's a fixture that I always tend to look forward to, because we always tend to go into it sort of like thinking our Wolves are a good side. They've got too many good players that they'll absolutely, we'll do very well to get a result against them. But we always tend to perform in it for whatever reason. Like you say, the two tactics might be sort of like in our favour, because you can't break us down, like you say. But talk to me about then your ambitions for the season then, because like you say, you finished 7th a couple of times. Europa League and things like that. Obviously, we were there not so long ago as well. Obviously, Olympiacos ended up breaking our hearts at the Turf. We had a very, very bad qualifying games. You see like teams like Celtic, you'll get teams that you've never even heard of, and then we have to play Olympiacos, fuming. Let's talk to me about your ambitions for the season. And do you think you can knock on door of European places again? Do you think you can potentially even break your way into top 4? Because I think the top 4 this season is probably, from the outside looking in, you'll know more, probably might be a bit of a step too far for Wolves.
Yeah, I think last season was our chance. We're in a bit of transition. We've got quite a young squad now. We keep mentioning that Jota and Doherty went, Semedo and Fabio Silva have come in. But a young lad called Osasawi come off the bench against Chelsea, a young 19-year-old American. So we're a year ahead of our plan from when Nuno and Fosun took over. We got promoted a year early, so everything was a bonus last year. Having a taste of European football, obviously before the lockdown, going to some of the away games was unreal. Like every Wolves fan soaked it in, and I think a lot of Wolves fans said, "Let's hope to do that again." But the way this season started and the way the transfer windows are gone, I think a lot of Wolves fans are looking at it realistically and saying, "Let's get a mid-table and then let's go again next year." It'd be amazing if we could get 7th again, or even sneak into the Europa League, or top 4 would be out of this world. Let's be honest, but stranger things have happened because the table this year is all over the place, isn't it? So it's a hard one to predict. Yeah, but I think most Wolves fans would settle with a mid-table finish just to settle down again.
Yeah, I think the Premier League this season is just very inconsistent. As we were just saying off camera, Leeds are a very, very weird side. For example, they'll smash Villa, then get smashed against Palace. I mean, they've just got battered against Manchester United. I mean, there's no disgrace in that. I mean, when it's 2-0 after 3 minutes just rest a bit, Leeds. Sit back. Damage limitation.
Yeah.
Typical Leeds. They carried on going. But yeah, that's a perfect example of, like you say, how the league is so inconsistent. But let's look ahead to the game then. How do you think you're going to line up then? Not necessarily your starting 11, but sort of like your system. I know you've mentioned that you think Huno might go 4 at the back and then try and get an early goal. Is that what you think will happen then?
I do think that, but honestly, mate, the last 2 seasons, predicting Nuno's lineups, anyone could do it. Every Wolves fan could tell you how we'd play. This season, we've chopped and changed that much. No one can guess, but we played 5 at the back against Chelsea. It worked really well, but I'm going to predict, this could be completely wrong, I think we'll go 4 at the back, 2 holding midfielders with Podence, Neto and Adama in behind Fabio Silva. So like a 4-3-1. And yeah, I hope he does that, because I'd rather us just go for it against you and try and get that early goal than sit back, maybe have a lot of possession, but not break you guys down and say you'll probably get like a goal off a set piece or something, which will be so frustrating. And that it was quite a tight game last year. You mentioned the 1-1, and I know Raul come up with a bit of magic with that goal, but we weren't creating too many chances from memory. So I'd rather us try and create chances against you and play the 4 at the back. So the system will be 4-2-3-1, I hope.
Yeah, talk to me before we go back into more of the game. Actually, you mentioned Podence. Then I do want to talk more about him, because I've only seen him a couple of times. Because, like you say, he's not been there too long. So, what is it? How does he play? Like, why is he so good? For example, because you've mentioned yourself that you do think he's quite a nifty little player. So, what is it that he does so well?
Yeah, we brought him in from Olympiacos in the January last year, and he didn't really get a chance. He weren't getting into the team, and you could see little flashes of him. Like I mentioned, he's tiny. He's like 5'4", I think, and he's compared a lot to like a poor man's Eden Hazard. The way he plays, like low centre of gravity, loves the quick turn, amazing on the ball. His finishing could be a bit better, but he's starting to score a few goals now, so we let him for that. But against Chelsea, someone clipped up like a highlight reel on Twitter, and some of the skills he pulls off, mate, like he megs his people and things like that. He's just on fire. That's why he's getting so much attention at the moment. So brilliant player, and him and Neto are on form players at the moment. Really good.
So looking ahead again then tomorrow, you mentioned Podence, you mentioned Neto as well. Then are they your danger men, or is there anyone else that Burnley should be looking out for? The obvious ones as well. Obviously, there's Traore as well. How's he doing as well at the minute? Actually, is he still playing well and stuff?
He hasn't scored a goal since last December, and he hasn't got an assist since the end of last season in like June or July, so not the best. There was a contract dispute. It doesn't sound great, does it? Yeah, there was a contract dispute, and he hasn't signed a new contract, so he was on the bench a lot at the beginning of this season, and he'd come on and not do much, to be honest. And he's played right wing back a few times, which he's not very good there. His best position is like a right forward if we play like the 3 up top. And yeah, he's not been very good, mate. Honestly, he got dropped against Chelsea, I believe it was, and then came on for the last 20 minutes or so. So it's not 100% he'll start against you. But the good thing about Traore is if he don't start, he's such an impact player because of his pace. He comes on about 70th minute and your defence is tired. He can do some damage, but he's due a goal or an assist.
Yeah, to be honest, mate, if it were 0-0 and we'd had us backs against the wall for the last 5-10 minutes, which is not unusual for Burnley in the 75th minute, and then you brought him on, I'd pick the pillar up and just hide behind it for the next 10 minutes, honestly. But yeah, let's get into who do you think will be the danger men then tomorrow? Who do you think are going to be the Wolves players that are going to be the danger men?
I'd look out for, I'm going to single out Neto. Neto, mate, honestly, lethal at the moment. He never stops running. He's only 20 years old as well. He's definitely going to be a superstar. And you'll see him. He plays like on the left of a free most of the time. Very skillful, very quick, very strong, and got a lethal left foot. His goal against Chelsea, I don't know if you saw it, but he's rocketed it bottom corner. And for mate, really good player.
Fair enough. And what are the sort of Burnley players then do you think that Wolves should look out for? Like, as a Wolves fan, when you watch Burnley, who do you think, not necessarily look out for, because obviously, I think, to be fair, our best players are defensive players, but I'll change the question. Like, who do you think are Burnley's best players then? When you watch Burnley and you look at Burnley, who do you think are the players that, not necessarily you'd want, but like I say, are our best players?
Yeah, I don't know if he's your best player, but we mentioned him on ours, mate. He's Chris Wood. I think because of his old connections to like Albion and that as well. He used to play for Albion, right? Or have I made that up?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, so
I think he did.
He always just seems to pop
up. That.
Yeah, he could. Oh, yeah, but we were linked with him when he was at Leicester. We were actually linked with him to come to the Wolves at one point a few years ago. But him, mate, I think you mentioned that, like, he's scored a lot of goals for you the last few years, and it always just feels like he's going to score whenever he plays against Wolves. So I'm worried about him. I don't think he's necessarily your best player, as mentioned, but I'm just worried about him popping up with a goal at some point, which does worry me.
Yeah, I think we'd just be happy if Woody popped up with a goal at some point this season at this stage, mate. Like, I think I said to you on your podcast this week, didn't I? Like, I'm Chris Wood's biggest fan. I back him all the time. I will always back him. But at the minute he is struggling. He needs a goal. He really does need a goal. Well, then, it's getting towards the end of the show, so obviously I'm going to have to ask you your predictions. And don't worry, you can always predict a Wolves win. I don't ever say to people that, oh, you're predicting that. That's fair enough if you want to predict a Wolves win.
I'm going to go for 1-0 Wolves, mate. Quite a late goal.
You know what? If I'm one of them, I think if it's 0-0 at half time, especially when we had fans in the ground and when we were away from home, to be fair, but it's 0-0 at half time. We played Villa recently, and I said the exact same thing on a Villa podcast. If it's 0-0 at half time, I'm quietly confident that we'll either get a draw or nick a win. I think for me, I know you've mentioned it, that you want to try and get an early goal. If you get an early goal, you will pull us out. To a Burnley, in a Burnley, where we're not going to open up like Man City and Leeds, but we're going to come out of the two banks of four. So there will be space in the middle of the two banks where, like you say, some of your players will get some joy. The first goal in Burnley games is massive. It's probably bigger than anybody else in the Premier League. Like, if Burnley get that first goal, they're going to sit back and they're going to frustrate you even more. If the opposition, or Wolves, obviously in this case, get the first goal, then we have to open up, and sometimes we can get absolutely battered, as we've seen against Man City this season, Spurs last season, and things like that. Leicester this season as well. Even Newcastle scored 3 against us. So yeah, I think the first goal is massive. If you get that first goal, then yeah, I'll be very surprised if we manage to get back into it. But anyway, Harry, thanks for coming on to the TurfCast Podcast pre-game show. And just before we do go, do you want to let everyone know where they can find your podcast and how to watch and download and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's the @77 Club podcast on Twitter, and just the Wolves 77 Club everywhere else. If you search that on like Spotify and iTunes, we've also got a YouTube channel too, which you were on the other day. And yeah, mate, that's where you can find us.
Happy days. Well, thanks for coming on, Harry. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.